Hi, my name's Joe.
And I'm Mike.
And you're listening to How Many Fingers Am I Holding Up, the podcast. And this week, we'll be reviewing Independence Day Resurgence.
Yet another confusing title for history dads everywhere.
Hello everyone, and welcome to How Many Fingers Am I Holding Up, featuring two guys getting tainted and reviewing movies in a weekly podcast form.
And wouldn't you guess it, thank you to Testify Me on Twitter for that suggestion. Another testicularly related suggestion.
Yes, he loves the no parts of the male anatomy.
Oh, he loves the gonads. He also suggested, or I guess was wondering if we were reviewing Independence Day Resurgence.
Lucky guess,
and we just happened to be, so we had to use his suggestion for this one. So thank you for that. If you guys have any further suggestions, you can hit us up on Twitter at HMF Podcast, or on Facebook, How Many Fingers Podcast, Instagram, How Many Fingers Podcast, Tumblr, How Many Fingers Podcast, or our website, howmanyfingerspodcast.com.
Whoa.
Woo! Woo! Right off the noggin.
Oh boy. So this week we'll be drinking Passion Fruit Kicker, a wheat ale with passion fruit from Green Flash. Sounded like a commercial. Mike picked this up. Mike, is there any sort of story behind why you...
It's on the rack I usually go to, and it looked cool. No, something about the can. It's got like a kind of a matte black and a little bit of a glossier... purple violet looking banner across it. It says it's luscious and tart, so it looked interesting, so we're gonna give it a try.
And run over to the fridge.
You left me alone there for a minute.
Sorry. So you go for aesthetic. I also am a person who buys beer by aesthetic, and I'm usually disappointed, but
it's light.
It is. I'm also drinking like this seltzer water that's like berry flavored. So this is not that far.
It's
this is
similar.
Really similar tasting.
You don't get so much of the wheat ale. It kind of knocks you in the face. I mean, it's not passion fruit's not like an overly sweet fruit. It just kind of.
It's not like sour or sweet.
This tastes like vitamin water.
Yeah.
Beer.
It does.
Like alcoholic vitamin water.
It definitely does.
It's not bad. I think we always talk about in terms of like flavored beers. Like I like when they're more subtle as opposed to being over the top when it just feels like a novelty. Like I think this is more on the novelty side, but it's definitely very drinkable.
Yeah, I like it. It's pretty good, and it's pretty muted. It's not a vibrant flavor.
I mean, if Green Flash wants to sponsor us, we might like it even more.
Hey, Green Flash. I've never heard of Green Flash before. But
Passion Fruit Kicker. It's there.
How Many Fingers raves? It's muted.
You can drink it.
I could probably drink more of this. God, if any brewery out there that's just listening to a movie podcast
if you're making beer
now,
in your basement and you want to sponsor us,
I'll shout from the mountaintop of our 100 villagers and promote your beer.
Or occasionally 63.
Yeah. Sometimes even more.
It's a transient village.
Sometimes a few hundred. Imagine that. Deadpool. We didn't like it, but people like that podcast episode.
So just by way of update, to keep you guys updated on In Development and its progress in that, My Road Reel 2016 contest that we've been badgering you about for the past couple of episodes. The contest is over. We didn't win. It was rigged. No, it wasn't rigged. But we did finish number 96 overall in voting, so in the top 100. It would have been nice to be a little bit higher, but overall, I can't say I'm too mad about it. There are some very excellent films ahead of us in there. And I think there was, in the end, 1,224 films overall.
Oh, wow. I was just going to say over 1,000, but yeah.
Yeah, so being in the top 100 is not a bad thing at all for an international film contest.
Right. And
if you haven't seen it yet, you can still watch it at that link. But maybe we're not going to promote Road anymore since they didn't want to have us win their contest.
Yeah, Road. What was that all about?
So if you just search In Development, My Road Reel 2016, or really any combination of those words on YouTube, you can find our link. It should be pretty close to the top. Or just search back on our social media since we've been badgering you about it for the past however long.
Definitely. And there was a best soundtrack award. There were a few different awards that I think I do think we're robbed of a few of these awards. I think the cinematography, Jordan was robbed. Check out Jordan next week on Swiss Army Man. He'll be talking about that movie, our cinematographer. And I think we're all shocked. Soundtrack.
Yes.
Didn't win, and that's by Evan Vinjamari. And I know Mike has more to say about that.
Yeah, I mean, I was just super in love with Evan's soundtrack.
A lot of people were, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was honestly one of my favorite parts of the film. I don't know if that has anything to do with what we created or if that's just his genius on his own, but I think he did a really great job. And I was really hoping for him. I thought that was the strongest part. We didn't even end up being in the finalist for that, which I think that's where I feel most robbed. Like,
we didn't.
If we didn't win, that's fine, but I would have liked to be in the finalists, but... Not to be bitter about anything. You can still listen to the soundtrack. It's on Spotify now, so if you search Moving Through Open Space, that's Evan's sort of solo project name that he has. Or if you search In Development original score, I believe you can find that as well. And that should be his most recent track on there, and you can listen to it. It's exactly 3 minutes long because he wrote it for the 3-minute film contest. But I think it's a beautiful piano soundtrack, nice to fall asleep to or study to or write to.
The contacts in my eyes, they're drying up. No, they're not. That was just a weird catching myself as I fall. Right. But the contest, as we're speaking, actually isn't over. And most of the awards have been announced already.
Oh, that's right. There is one more day of...
I think we're recording this the 2nd, and I believe on the 4th, July 4th, Independence Day, is when the what's it called? The People's Choice Awards with Sandra Bullock hosting. That will be announced, and it kind of sucks because the person in first right now is like some kid with like 80,000 YouTube subscribers.
Yeah, wasn't it just like his documentary about going to Comic-Con or something?
I went to Comic-Con, yeah, and
I saw some costumes.
Yeah, and I mean it's like cut pretty cool. I mean, like no offense to this kid, but it's just he has an enormous advantage.
Yeah.
But there's that award. There's the female filmmaker award, which we're sure to win. The under 18
Michelle King.
Yeah. The under Michelle King. We're going in next time as Michelle King.
It's the French Michael, yes.
And the under 18 award. Which
also sure to win.
We will also drag in, and then after that, I believe the Road judges, like final award or whatever, which I think we've kind of just already. I just assume we're not going to win that.
Yeah, I mean we haven't been in the finals for any of the other awards. Thus far. So,
but it was.
I have no regrets. I thought we ran an honest campaign and we made a good film. For literally under $300. Like I just submitted everything to IMDb today, and for the budget we were at about just under $300. So
it's bittersweet, really, to kind of cast this project off, kind of thing. It's the end of this contest, at least, and it's been one heck of an experience because it's really kind of opened us back up to creating our own films, and I think a large part of that we do to this podcast because. You know, we're going out there
other people's movies
and seeing film all the time, and we're like, oh, fuck,
yeah,
that's what we want to do. And so we owe it to you guys and the people who listen to this.
Special thanks to anyone who did actually go out of their way to vote. We do super appreciate that because you know we weren't first, but number 96 out of 1,224 films is nothing to laugh at. So we're definitely very appreciative of that.
Thank you.
So
In other news.
in other news, and more positive news for the podcast, we're moving into merchandising for the podcast.
Ooh, this has been something we've had in the works for a little while.
The logo that Joe designed for this podcast is just begging to be on merchandise everywhere. So we thought the most appropriate first merchandise purchase would be beer koozies.
Oh, yes.
Collapsible foam beer koozies for all the beer that you guys are drinking while listening to this podcast.
Or soda if you're under
or soda
21.
or ginger ale or seltzer, as Joe's
water,
drinking.
yes. You can, and it's just
Or passion fruit kicker from Green Flash Brewery.
Green Flash. Your can is bleeding all over me. The black mat.
Oh, God.
Hey,
It looks cool.
It's still a great product, though. If you guys
It's
wanna
not
send
bleeding
this
inside the beer.
it's only coating my organs.
But yeah, we ordered a bunch of koozies. The colors we got are pretty cool. We got a bunch of various
More than
colors.
one color.
More than one color.
Which was a plus for us.
Yes, we were able to get 10 colors on the cheap. So we got black, burgundy, camo, dusty rose, which is like a kind of dirtier pinkish color.
Yeah.
Eggplant, hunter green, mint, navy blue, placid blue, and red. And those are all with our logo in white screen printed on there.
It's printed on both sides.
On both sides, yes.
Cost an extra cent.
You're worth it.
We did this for you guys.
So as we're recording this, we don't have them in our possession yet.
We don't know what they could look god awful.
Yeah. Hopefully they look good. We'll probably get some promo photos up for
Yeah.
you soon. And I'm not exactly sure how the buying process for this is going to work out. We'd like to have it on the website. There will be a link of some sort on the website. I just don't know how that's going to play out because I have to actually mess around with the coding and stuff.
Yeah, as long as you follow us on any of our real social media, I'm sure we'll be posting about these all over the place, and we'll have some sort of link where you'll be able to pick them up.
But I would assume it's safe to say you can go to howmanyfingerspodcast.com and there'll be some sort of link there to buy it, if not just a store tab for you to check out and all that there. And as it stands right now, it looks like it's probably going to be $5 per koozie, and that's with shipping included. So you can get the shipping pretty cheap. We just want to get these out to you guys so you can rock your How Many Fingers koozie, show your podcast allegiance.
Definitely.
And also, to go along with this, we're going to be running a little contest because we've been amassing some prizes for you guys.
We have.
With all the different movies that we go to, there's always some kind of like swag that we're getting from some of the bigger movies, like posters. And so we thought, what a cool way to sell some of these koozies than with a contest. So, Joe, if you want to go over some of these contest rules for the fellas.
I certainly will.
Ladies.
Yeah, I mean, we've never really asked for any sort of donations or anything. So if you ever really wanted to support the podcast or you enjoy the podcast, go ahead and pick up a koozie. I mean, they look really cool.
Yeah.
And I think all the colors we picked out, I think it's especially cool that we have all these different colors and that you'll be able to have your own individual sort of color. And again, you can look through all that on our website. But we're going to be running a contest, and we have several prizes available, which I'll go over at the end. But to be ackable for this contest, is that the right word?
Ackable? Is that a word?
Ackable? If you want to ackable! Oh. It's like weird Bill Cosby. Your keys are ackable. If you would like to be in the running for this contest.
The entry rules for the
yes,
contest.
The entry rules for the podcast
are ackable as follows.
Yes.
You need to like us on Facebook at www.facebook.com/howmanyfingerspodcast. And then we're asking that you take a selfie with your How Many Fingers koozie when it arrives and tag our page after you've liked it. And then we'll pick the winners at random from that.
Right, so after you've taken a selfie with your koozie, with your brand new koozie, cooling off your beverage, take a picture, a selfie, and post it on your wall and tag our liked page, basically.
Yes, if you can't guess, the idea is we want more Facebook likes.
Yes, yeah. We're struggling in the Facebook department, so go ahead and do that.
But yeah, and so the prizes that we're offering you guys, the biggest one, courtesy of our good friend Daniel Martin, it's a Deadpool DVD.
It's a Blu-ray.
Deadpool Blu-ray. And I think it also has a digital download included
right.
as well. It might even have the DVD. It's in my room, but I'm too lazy to go get it. But yeah, brand new. And you guys obviously liked that movie since you listened to that review over 200
Everybody
times.
likes Deadpool except for us. So that's
So
a big
please
one.
get it out of my room. I don't want it in my house anymore.
So that's all you guys need to do is do that, and you guys will potentially win the Deadpool Blu-ray. We also have posters
from Spectre.
Spectre.
If you listen to the first
I
episode,
hardly know her.
These are the posters that got us confused for movie terrorists with scary paper masks.
Yes.
The
This
posters.
is How Many Fingers
History.
Yes.
We have posters from 10 Cloverfield Lane, and then we also have those booklets from when we went to see Hateful Eight in 70mm. They handed out booklets from that, which I just have no use for. So maybe you guys will think they're cool.
Right, yeah. So
And I don't know. I mean, maybe you guys can let us know if you want us to sign them. I don't want to ruin anything if you guys don't want our signature on them. We'll be in touch if you do win. But those are the prizes we're offering. We haven't actually set like a date that we're going to conclude the contest, but if you're listening to this on Thursday, assume probably at least a month from there. We'll talk about it more in further episodes, but
definitely
let's get the koozies in our house first and get the webpage up and running. But this is a little preview of the contest that will be running. So keep a lookout for details about
I'm
that.
sure it'll be all of our social media stuff. So as long as you follow us on there, it'll be there. So,
What are we doing?
what am I doing?
I think we're reviewing Independence Day Resurgence.
So the IMDb description is 2 decades after the first Independence Day invasion, Earth is faced with a new extrasolar threat. But will mankind's new space defenses be enough?
That's just a weird phrase.
That is
Extrasolar.
Extrasolar threat.
Is it supposed to just mean outside of our solar system, or outside of like beyond the sun? Like, was extraterrestrial not enough?
Yeah, I mean, solar is defined as just relating to the sun. Like, what is?
But I mean, if it's extrasolar, it's like outside of this. I mean, we're extrasolar, are we not?
Yeah, I really don't understand.
So, like, ISIS is an extrasolar threat.
Yeah, that's a bizarre.
It's just a weird
description.
choice of words.
Yeah, and also they ended it on a question, which I've never seen them do. Like, it's kind of like, is this going to be enough? Is this description good enough?
Can I end it here?
Oh man, 2 decades after the first Independence Day invasion is also a really awkward way of putting it. I feel like in the movies they never really are like, this is the Independence Day invasion. They're just kind of like, y'all want to see some fireworks? Like, kind of
they
like
have
thing.
some weird tiebacks, and they bring back every single fucking character from Independence Day. But
Yeah.
there's no, they don't really have like a name for it besides, I guess, like the attack. Maybe they call it at one point. There's some
Right.
bland phrase like that they call it.
Just another post 9/11 movie.
Yeah. So we got some notes for this. We got some bare bones combined notes for this.
Bare bones notes. I don't have any notes for this, really.
It was written, directed by somebody. He directed these movies previously.
Well, yeah.
It was written, directed and written by a lot of people, but one of them was Roland Emmerich. And he also wrote and directed the original Independence Day, Day After Tomorrow, Godzilla, and 2012. So, Dog obviously likes his disaster movies.
He does. I don't like him as a director either. I think he's just done some real crap.
Yeah, he doesn't have a whole
Like
lot.
10,000 BC, the 2012. Like he's done like all those like kind of Day After Tomorrow.
Yeah, just big
all
budget,
in a
like,
row, really
spectacle
too.
movies, yeah.
I mean,
the
The Patriot.
I mean, original Independence Day, that's a classic, great 90s movie. The only reason this movie is getting made is because the original Independence Day was a decent movie. Don't you shake your fucking memory, Joe.
I got
Are we
beef
gonna
with the original one. I hate the original one. I think it's so bad.
Oh God!
I've never understood
Did you
it.
watch it as a kid?
Yeah.
And you hated it as a kid?
Yeah.
Who are you?
I don't know. Well, that's the thing. I think people love Independence Day, and
Yes.
I'm definitely a black sheep in this whole. I don't know. It's like older people, younger people, people whose opinions I respect like it, and it was just I don't know. And it was like this watershed, film for like big dumb blockbusters. Like everything that happened after that too was just like big and dumb. Where like in like the 70s and 80s, like these blockbuster films were like Spielberg and like George Lucas. But then we got to like Independence Day, disaster porn,
Well, it was like
this launched his career.
The good, directors of the 70s and 80s created kind of the format that we're like really following by the time the 90s came around. When the 90s came around, it was kind of just like anyone can fucking direct these action movies.
Yeah.
We have like the formula down, and you kind of just like put stuff in the mold.
Right.
I think Independence Day is a classic night. It's one of the best like alien invasion movies that I can think of. Like, and there's nothing really like maybe at the time, nothing really.
I think it's iconic. I think
nothing
like the White House being blown up is
groundbreaking
iconic
about it.
Right.
But it's just solid, and it's just good, and it's fun. That's everything that I wanted from like a blockbuster movie, even now.
Right.
But especially what I wanted at like 6 years old in 1996, and throughout the 90s when I was watching it like 2 or 3 times a year as a kid.
Yeah. I don't know. Like, I don't know. It's something about it. Like, I mean, I think me and Kevin were talking about this with X-Men. We throw around the word schlock a lot. And like, I love schlock, but I don't think like that original one was schlock. It was like, it wasn't dumb or like bad enough to be like schlock. It was just kind of bad in my opinion.
I don't know. I can't think of anything that I think is like bad about it. Like I think the alien design is like you don't laugh at it. It's kind of intimidating.
They're kind of just like weird, like kind of like ripoffs of like aliens from before, but with like tentacles and like. I just like I think the screenwriting in the original one was like kind of dumb. I think like the structure is like it's all there, but it's like very base structure. It's just dumb. And I think it's written for dumb people. And I think there's like I think there's a bunch of like cues for like dumb people to cheer in like the audience. Like
I have to disagree.
I can't think of
it's a great story arc of like, and we'll get into this. Mm-hmm. This will be a good segue to get into all the qualms that I have with Independence Day Resurgence, because I feel like all the good things that Independence Day did as an original movie, Independence Day Resurgence was just like. I completely forget everything that you did.
Right.
What did I do 20 years ago? Because I can't remember. Uh-huh. But I mean, Independence Day, you have like all these kind of random people coming together, not necessarily a ragtag group. They all have a reason for being there. But you get a taste of life from like all the different corners. You have, the president, his staff. You have David Levinson or whatever his name is, Jeff Goldblum's character, all the people he's working with. And then you've got Will Smith in the Air Force. His wife is like a stripper, so she's like obviously very like.
What is the reason for his wife to be a stripper too?
In that movie, I mean, I think it's just to show like the lower, like they're showing all the different like parts of America.
True.
So then when the actual like disaster happens, you get to see it from like all the different angles, like the White House, like the president obviously being very protected but still being scared, evacuating the White House. You have, the stripper mom, like, in the city of... Or they're in, like, Dallas or something.
And, like, carting around the first lady.
Yeah, like... I mean,
but, like, I feel like she was movie did well, because
it was truly a disaster movie, like, in a good way. Like, it was showing all the different people trying to survive this, like, nationwide disaster. And even outside of those people, you had, like... in like the Michael Bay kind of way, like, kids in the car watching stuff happen and just like random people that we don't need to know. They're just interesting characters to look at and see through their eyes as like all these cities are getting torn apart. I thought the movie did that very well, and it had a decent amount of character development for a blockbuster disaster movie in terms of, especially like David Levinson's character, his relationship with his wife. He's a loner. He's kind of lost in his work, hasn't really found his way, hasn't really kept his faith like his father's wanting him to. There's just a lot of stuff that like comes full circle. They plant seeds, they pay off very well in the end. And again, it's not groundbreaking. There's not any like huge overall message for you to like, besides like the unity of, you know, the nations at the end for you to really come away with. But it's just everything is there for it to be decent writing, in my opinion. The punchlines are there and are good, and the action is good in that movie. So I just think the Independence Day is like the perfect 90s like action movie. If I
guess they have I watched it recently, and it sets up just like all the most random kind of like Jeff Goldblum and his dad are like playing chess, and they're trying to make all these chess analogies, but the alien invasion doesn't really work with chess, and
that's cheesy, but that's a plant and payoff that I don't mind in like a 90s action movie. Whereas like Independence Day Resurgence,
but still, it's modern cinema. I consider 90s movies like modern cinema. Like I like so many like 90s action adventure movies. And I don't know, maybe I just don't like this genre of like kind of disaster porn, you know?
Yeah.
Like I think maybe that's what it is, and I think maybe
I'm not a huge fan of it either.
Other
I just think
movies
Independence
kind of weigh
Day
heavily on
does
me.
it the best.
Yeah.
Because it shows it from so many different perspectives. But maybe let's talk about Independence Day Resurgence a little bit more. I don't know, I thought the whole thing kind of started out feeling like it was like a young adult series, or almost like an anime in certain ways, like
with the space people.
Like everyone's so young in this movie, like compared to original Independence Day.
It's
like,
kind of
and
a
again,
weird
a lot of my
casting,
complaints
yeah.
are comparing this movie to the original Independence Day. But like, we've got the hot hunk Liam Hemsworth.
It's almost like they're trying to set up like no, that's exactly what it is. Like a young adult like Maze Runner, like Hunger Games kind
and
of.
these are all people that have been in these.
Yeah,
movies.
no, that's very true. Yeah.
But you have hot hunk Liam Hemsworth as Jake Morrison, who's the bad boy pilot on the moon base. And I guess they sent up this EDS, this extraterrestrial defense or something defense system to defend and prepare for the inevitable re-attack from these aliens.
Right.
And he's got his like sidekick partner kind of co-pilot guy, Charlie, who is like the most annoying character.
Oh, I liked him.
No.
He was like the only good part of the film. Yeah, I liked him.
Like even if like you like him as like an actor, like
Right.
I couldn't help but thinking that like in a world where like aliens attacked, like the
Right.
Air Force is like the top of the top at that point, because that's our defense. He's essentially an astronaut, but like he just does not seem smart enough to be an astronaut, physically fit enough to be an astronaut.
They set him up as like the fucking like boy genius.
No, he screws up in the first scene.
Well, no. But he like this is like they hit you over the head with this in dialogue. He's like, "You shouldn't be here. You're too smart. You're not smart like me. Like you're not dumb like me up here. And like as a pilot or whatever." And he's like, "Yeah, but you're like my brother, and I'm so smart that I want to be up here with like you or whatever." I mean, they set him up as a really smart character, but like an
he doesn't come across like a smart
egghead kind of. Yeah.
He doesn't come across like a nerd though. He just
not
comes
like
across as
street
like
smart, but yeah.
just like a fast talk. In the word I wrote down is he feels like a sidekick or like the best friend from like a John Green novel, or like he seems so much like a young adult movie. Like I could have put him in like
I placed
Looking for Alaska or The Fault in Our Stars or something like that. Like
I would place more what's his friend's name?
his friend is which character are you talking about?
Just the who's the Liam Hemsworth, right? The Jake character. I would place him more as sort of a Hunger Games sort of character, and then this character seems like a sort of sidekick, but I would more be like an action film sort of sidekick. I don't know.
I mean, it just seems like a very like teenage, like, oh, this is what best friends are like. They're always funny, and they just are always saying stuff like this.
Right.
They're weird and quirky. And then we have Jesse Usher as Dylan Dubrow Miller, who is Will Smith's son, but not actual son, which I guess was part of the reason why Will Smith was not in this movie, or there was some weird stuff about...
There was...
I know a lot of it had to do with price
this...
and contract and his schedule conflict with Suicide Squad.
Will Smith is the most interesting, but will also like turn back on, and this is just like coming off the top of my head, but just in my opinion, he comes off like he makes the most weird movie choices.
Yeah.
Where he'll like turn down something and then he'll be like, I don't know, like he just was at some film fest or something and he said like, oh, I turned down, like he said something about like he's like, he went on stage and he's like, hey everyone, I really regret doing Wild Wild West. And everyone's like, what? And he was like, I can't believe I turned on the Matrix.
That's right.
And like kind
He
of
turned on
like
the Matrix.
he like traced like his whole kind of like movie like history through that or whatever. And I think when I remember a very, very long time ago, they came to him with this and he said, listen, I just kind of came off a box office flop with After Earth. And I think the screenwriter originally wanted to make this kind of like a father-son kind of story.
Yeah.
But then Will Smith is like, no, we just did that and it was fucking terrible. So, I don't know. I think Will Smith could have been the anchor to make this a good movie.
Oh, yeah. Because Will Smith...
I don't know about Jaden, though. Because they would have had to... cast him. Yeah.
I mean, he hasn't really proven himself to be worthy. But, like, there's no one in this movie that really is capable of carrying a movie of this, like, grandiose, like, scale. Like, even, like, Jeff Goldblum, like, as, like, household of a name as he is, nobody really cares about Jeff Goldblum enough to just go see this because of him. And then even if you did, you would be sorely disappointed by the Jeff Goldblum that you're getting at this point in his, like, career and life. He's not built for this type of movie anymore.
No, he's not at all.
As great as he was in the first one. So yeah, Will Smith would have been a welcome addition to this film. But then the guy who's playing his son, like, and this is one of my biggest complaints about the movie, is that it doesn't try to create new characters. It just pulls all this shit that we didn't need from the first movie. Like, did anyone care about Will Smith's son from the first movie, that we needed to make him a main character in this? So he's in it for whatever goddamn reason we need him in it. And then we also have Micah Monroe, I don't know how you pronounce that, who is playing Patricia Whitman, another character from the first movie, the daughter of former President Whitman, who is engaged to hot hunk Liam Hemsworth.
Right.
And like, just with that whole like triangle in itself, like, and they're explaining and setting her up as like the childhood friend of Dylan, who is Will Smith's son. Because they had like 2 scenes together in the first movie, so obviously they need to be childhood friends, and we have to find out about them like 20 years later. And then conveniently they all come up together at the exact same time in the flight academy. And then there's this weird, poorly developed backstory about how Jake was too reckless when they were like testing something.
That was really poor.
It was confusing because there's that where he was too reckless and he almost killed Dylan. So Dylan is now mad at him to the point where he punches him the first time he sees him. But then
so
there's
real,
also
like,
at the same time,
teenage high school kind of.
Yeah, at the same time, 11 years ago, they explained that Will Smith's character, Stephen Miller or whatever his name was, he dies testing new alien aircraft. So it's just like, I mean, maybe that's supposed to be part of it, but it was just too close together and they didn't have enough really to set that all up. But either way, the entire thing is just weird because it just ends up, I was like thinking of Attack on Titan for some reason the entire time.
Oh my god, yeah.
Like just like recruits like in the like flight academy, like all the different like, people together, and it felt too much like an anime.
The more I think of it, the more it is very anime-ish. Like space anime almost, like that. Because I don't know. And again, maybe I don't like things that other people, or maybe I like things that other people don't like, and vice versa. But I did kind of like this whole kind of like flight crew, and maybe it is like that weird anime anime interest that's like. It might have been alright,
maybe if Independence Day wasn't a movie, but coming from it's just a completely different style. Like Independence Day, the first one, was not trying to appeal to teens at all, or at least not pandering to teens. Whereas this feels like it's lowering the brow and like lowering the standards for teenagers to really sell that PG-13 ticket.
It was, it was successful enough to warrant a 3rd Independence Day, which is coming out. So, I mean, there's that, but it's, you know what? And it really did terrible in the box office too, which is like it did not, they spent a lot of money on this film, which is kind of surprising because like there were scenes where like all of the like fighter jets would like take off, and it kind of just looked like a really weird flash animation of just like, I was like, this looks terrible. I don't know what this is. Like a lot of stuff looked terrific. I don't know. A lot of like really talented people had to be behind the special effects of this, but there were some
I thought
scenes
like all
that
the
were
stuff
just,
that looked great just looked like it was conceptually still just drawn from the first Independence Day, like standing on their shoulders, and all the new stuff that they had to come up with, like the moon base on the moon. Like again, technically it looked good. Like, it didn't look fake. It looked convincing.
Right.
But there was just nothing that was like cool or like I just didn't care to look at it. Like, and in a movie like this where there's so much schlock and crap, like the visuals could have carried it if they tried a little bit harder to be more unique or inventive.
I did like something that I did like. There's very few things in this movie that I did like. One thing that I did like was I kind of liked the premise that they had, that they were in 2016, but in a split sort of 2016 where they had adapted this alien technology, and I think that gave it like a kind of cool edge. And like when I was first, you know, I liked it through and through. I thought it was pretty cool. I don't know.
Yeah.
I liked the kind of like hovering billboards with like fucking like projections or something, and I liked the new, fighter jets and how the alien technology sort of flung our rate of technology, through
and it
the
is
roof.
cool that it literally is taking place in 2016 in the movie. Like that's just cool timing. I like when movies are able to line up like that, and we're not hearing about 2014 or present day is like the go-to to just make things line up. Just an interesting fact that I wrote down. The original Patricia Whitman, the daughter of President Whitman, was played by the actress Mae Whitman, who's actually Anne from Arrested Development.
Oh, really? Oh, wow. That's a completely different.
It starts to seem familiar.
Who, her?
Who, her?
Was she funny?
Is she funny or something?
That's funny. I wish she played this now, kind of. Yeah. That would have been a lot more interesting movie.
Although Micah Monroe is a fucking babe to end all babes.
She is.
Damn, she cute.
I don't know whether
positives of this movie.
I don't know whether this makes me a.
I wish they'd given her character more to work with because there's not much there.
Right, and let me check real quick. I don't know if this makes.
Joe's just typing into Google Micah Monroe nude, Micah Monroe boob, Britney Spears boob.
No. Who was the fucking... Okay.
What are you looking for?
So this whole, what's it called? Fucking, what's his name? Plays his dad.
Who's dad?
My gosh.
Jeff Goldblum's dad?
Yes, Jeff Goldblum's dad, yes.
I don't know the actor's name, but yeah.
But like his whole story was completely unnecessary.
Oh god, yeah.
I thought like one of my favorite scenes in the movie, because I think this is the point where it's reaching schlock, is where Jeff Goldblum's on the phone with him, and he's like warning his dad, but his dad's on like his boat. Mm-hmm. And like meanwhile the aliens are kind of shifting the gravity, or their ship is so large that it has its own gravitational pull, and it's pulling our Earth up, so it's just lifting skyscrapers in the ocean and then just kind of dropping it. But meanwhile Jeff Goldblum's dad is just kind of in this tiny fishing boat, and he's like, oh boy, and he like looks around, and like there's this huge tidal wave of just cities crashing in the ocean behind him.
And he's just able to outrun it.
Yeah. And it's a crazy scene, and I think before he crashes, he's like, why did I buy this boat?
I should have bought a bigger boat.
Like, please, why did I buy this boat?
Oh god, I mean, I loved his character in the first movie. He was the comic relief essentially in the first movie. It also served to work with the relationship worked really well with him and David in the first movie. Mm-hmm. and he's kind of just like the overbearing, like sort of stereotypical Jewish father, but they still play him with great respect in the first movie for the Jewish faith, and like that's the big part of it about his character is that like in the first movie, yeah, hell yeah, because he's like leading like the prayer circles and stuff, like with like people of all different religions, and like he's the one who like gives like David the cigars, and like he serves a great purpose in the first movie, even if it's just to give them the cigars, but also for being a man of faith. He has a lot of lines about faith, and he's kind of just there for David,
right?
And also there for comic relief. In this movie, they attempt to put him there for comic relief, but all the jokes he tells kind of fall flat, and they almost end up feeling like racist and anti-Semitic in a way, like because in the first movie, like he wasn't just throwing like Jewish catchphrases around, whereas in this movie he's like, oh, schmuck, putz, like just Jewish words, like it just the dialogue was so god awful in all of this movie, and it's so apparent in his lines because there's no like respect or reverence given to that heritage or that faith. He's kind of just ends up being a Jewish stereotype, which is unfortunate because they already had a decent character established for him, and all they really carry over is, he calls his son and talks about how he doesn't have grandchildren, and he had no real reason to be in this movie.
No,
either.
Yeah,
they could have very easily just been like he was dead. Like,
see, I have different feelings about the original one. I think he was a Jewish stereotype in that one, and I don't even think he was defined enough to be sort of a Jewish stereotype in this one, where they maybe would have just like kind of like the Will Smith and his pilot friend. They threw in an uncomfortable amount of like, I hope we aren't fags, kind of like, like I hope we aren't gay, like don't propose to me, and like everybody else in like the kind of like Air Force is kind of like those two are gay, kind of like they had a bunch of really like uncomfortable jokes,
unfortunate.
Like yeah, and I don't know, I did think he was like a Jewish stereotype in the first one, like especially.
But I thought they did enough to flesh him out in the first one. He had enough reason to be there. I mean, you're establishing David as a character, so establishing his father makes sense,
right?
Even just to better flesh out David as a character in the first one. And like people can be like in line with stereotypes. Like when you make a movie, you don't have to like shy away from that, but you also have to give them a reason to just be in the movie and be a character. And I thought they did that in the first one, and then this one where he has no reason to be there. Like David doesn't need him at this point, like, and he's not really even like being like an inconvenience on David like he was in the first one where he was bothering him all the time,
right?
And this one he's kind of just there to just say like Jewish catchphrases and then have this weird side plot with all these like unnamed or named but only one, so you can't remember them.
My
kids,
God. I was gonna
kids.
say this, like, let's knock out this like plot line so we don't have to talk about this again. He's on his boat. The boat crashes. We assume he's dead because they're just killing all the old characters.
Out on top of the boat.
He winds up on top of the boat, and then there's 4 kids who are driving a car, and they're obviously like not old enough to, and they pick him up, and then he ends up driving, and then he goes, "What's going on over there?" And there's just like a school bus full of kids
that are stranded.
Yeah. And he says, "We better get to Area 51 with these kids."
Well, it's supposed to serve. I understand the thought that they might have had to do this. There's a line somewhere dropped about how he wants grandkids and David's not giving him grandkids.
Right.
Which is a horrible thing to say because David's wife died. They don't establish it very well, but it's a fact in the movie is that David's wife died at some point. That's why he's not giving you grandkids. His wife's dead.
Yeah.
Asshole. But he's kind of like harping on that, and then at the end of the movie, this isn't really a spoiler, but at the end of the movie, the kids are kind of like, he says, I think you should like come stay with me until we find out what's going on with your parents, or they say that, and he's like, I think I would really like that, and it's supposed to sort of resolve that, but it's like a problem that they created for themselves, like him wanting to have like grandkids. Like
what I was going to talk about before when we were talking about attractive females in this film,
what you were Googling before,
is the girl driving the car. In like the car, like she's the oldest one in the car.
The 12-year-old girl, yeah.
Yes, the 12-year-old girl. Anyway,
not old enough to drive, so definitely under 18. So continue. I'm curious.
I felt no. But she starts out, and you're like, oh, it's this young girl, and over the course of the film, they wildly sexualize her. I feel like maybe just me, but I think they wildly
Did they?
sexualize her. Yes, but by the time they reach like the salt flats or whatever, she kind of like gets out of the car and like her shirt looks like a little more like low cut and she has like this like large cleavage and she's like, you gotta like introduce me to your son or whatever, and like it's a
I
very
didn't pick up on that.
it's a very weird scene, and it's like that's a very Jeff Goldblum's a very older man,
Yes.
kind of.
He's gray.
And she's like a and they establish some sort of love story for him.
Yeah, we're gonna get into that. Yeah,
Just
I
a
got
very like
major beef with that.
haphazardly. But no, her name is Joey King, and she was born in 1999, which I think puts her at 17. So
Yeah, she's 9 years younger than me. So yeah, 17.
don't find her attractive. But they did this weird sexualizing thing with her, and I was like, okay.
Which is none of them needed to be there. Like I appreciate they were trying to
Gotta make these kids look sexy.
I appreciate that they were trying to introduce new characters because the film sorely needed it. The
Mm-hmm.
old characters are just not pulling their weight
Right.
in terms of the story or the actual film or just appeal on screen
just
itself.
acting.
Yeah, nobody's doing anything.
So I understand why they try to make it Hunger Games-esque kind of.
But then they
I
didn't
don't
give
know,
those
yeah.
kids any kind of, besides
Yeah.
their parents or maybe dead. You don't really understand all of their relationship to each other. I don't know if they're all supposed to be siblings or
Right.
3 of them are siblings and 2 of them are friends that are just there. Like they just didn't do enough. Maybe just like less kids would have been a better thing. Like if there was just 2 of them. Because I mean, the movie already has way too many characters to begin with. But we should definitely talk about Jeff Goldblum or the David Levinson character. Because I thought I know you have complaints with the first movie, but I thought in the first movie the sort of love story arc that they established there is one of the better ones from the 90s in my mind. Just in terms of it's not your stereotypical guy meets girl.
Right.
They're in a apocalypse scenario, so they obviously have to fall in love. And that movie,
Right.
it was his ex-wife that he left for reasons relating to his career and his you know, his drinking problem and stuff like that.
Right.
And then through the movie, which is this, you know, his character arc is, you know, becoming a better person, becoming more reliable, getting rid of his drinking problem and all that. And through that, he's able to actually get her back and they reunite and like they're together at the end of the movie. In this movie, 20 years later, rather than having him, you know, with this wonderful woman that he reunited with at the end of the movie, she's just killed off in a car accident before the movie, like 8 years earlier.
Yeah.
And now in this movie, they have like literally one line of dialogue to explain it. He's not like beaten up about it at all. Like they just kind of forget that character ever existed.
Right.
And they replace her with Charlotte Gainsbourg, who is just an unnecessary character to begin with. And it kind of just becomes painfully obvious that like really they just wanted a younger girl in there because apparently 58 is too old to play the love interest of a 65-year-old male character.
Right. Yeah. No. Exactly. Yeah.
I don't know, I just thought that was painful, and just to completely like abandon. Like it's fine if she dies, but like then don't give him a love interest. Like we just don't need to see that because it was unnecessary to begin with. It's not like Charlotte Gainsbourg is like this like major like piece of ass like eye candy like. So if she's gonna be a weak character, she's gonna have some other purpose besides being Jeff Goldblum's love thing on the side.
Is that who
I think it was
was
Charlotte.
playing with her?
I think it's Charlotte Gainsbourg. Yeah,
She's super. Well, she's not super young, but
she's younger than 65 or however old
she's
Jeff
in like
Goldblum is.
because this is like her first. I was looking at that earlier. I think this is like her first like American film. She's like only in Lars von Trier movies.
and
Yeah.
independent movies. Yeah.
One thing that about this movie from the last film, I think, is that I think. Sorry, just burping. I think Roland Emmerich sort of wrote himself, or whoever wrote the last film. I know there was 5 screenwriters on this film, which is why it felt like 5 movies playing at once.
Which is why there's 5 times the characters.
Right? Yeah, it's kind of like they cobbled like those 5 screenplays together. But
All right, each one of you come up with an idea.
you're right. But the director Emmerich kind of like wrote himself into a hole. Which, yeah, does he have any sort of involvement with writing these movies? I feel like
Roland Emmerich and Dean Devlin wrote Independence Day, the first one.
Okay.
I think they
he's
pioneered
like,
this
I
one.
feel like he thinks he's Steven Spielberg. But like because he's like hitting kind of like all those marks in some sense, but it's like all the same sort of themes and same sort of like beats over the course of the movie, and like all the same characters kind of in all these movies. Like what is there? There's not a huge difference between like Godzilla and Independence Day almost. Like if you look at both of them back to back.
Yeah.
But what was I saying before? He kind of wrote himself into a hole by like the first movie was kind of it was all over the place. It was from multiple points of view, and now in this movie he's like, oh shit, I have to do that again. And there's like some scenes where it's like the guys in the boat that are checking how far it's getting to the Earth's core.
Yeah, again,
and
another
like,
weak attempt to create new characters, underdevelop them.
It was just kind of like, we don't need that. Like, it was just, it's kind of like, we're rich, $100,000. Nothing was like really charming about them at all. There was kind of like this, again, when the guy on the phone was just kind of like, they'll pay us like $100 million.
I think
and
it was
then they all
their
stopped
attempt
drinking.
to try to make it seem more worldwide in terms of, I don't know if they were South African or they were some kind of...
They were something.
Yeah. But not working. Another like huge complaint that I had, it's a small part of the movie, but there's Vivica Fox playing Dylan's mom. I forget her name. Or Will Smith's widow, rather, from the first movie. And in the first movie, she was a stripper, but like it was.
Now she's a doctor, like strippers usually do.
Well, like in the first movie, like they obviously acknowledged that she was a stripper, and they even have a scene where she's with like the first lady, and like the first lady is kind of like, when she says she's a stripper, she's kind of like, oh, and she's like, oh, I'm not like ashamed of it. She's like, it's what I had to do to like support my baby and everything. Like, and it was kind of like empowering in a way. And it wasn't like denigrating to strippers, whereas the fact that they made her a doctor now is kind of denigrating to strippers, because it almost seemed like, because again, this is a spoiler alert, I don't think it's a huge spoiler, she does die in this movie during one of the attack scenes, and it kind of seemed like transparent that they made her a doctor so that we would be forced to care when she died, like as if we couldn't care if she was a stripper and she died. And it just felt like too illogical of a junk. Not that strippers can't become, and she's not a doctor, she's actually a hospital administrator, which is like also like pretty high up there. Like I think you have to go through that like being like a nurse first, but that's still like pretty high up like the totem pole in terms of like chain of command in like a hospital. Like,
that was just one of those like,
it was just, I mean, her character altogether was kind of unnecessary, just like Dylan's character was unnecessary in the movie to begin
definitely
with.
right.
So she's by that unnecessary as well, but it's just not a terribly logical jump rather. It can happen, but I feel like it requires explanation. Like, I don't know. That was just my first question, was like, why is she like a doctor now? Like, I would have been fine if she was still a stripper or even just retired. Like.
Right. No, yeah. And it's just, I got a completely different feeling from her in the first one. I really didn't know why she had to be a stripper. And then I feel like she was only really a stripper for like the kind of punchline of the first lady being like, oh, you're a dancer? What kind of dancer? And be like, oh, I'm an exotic dancer. And then she goes like, oh, like kind of like, oh,
but that's fine.
Like, it's just
even
like,
that is more of a purpose than her being a hospital administrator, so that we feel bad when she dies.
Right. No,
I think Hollywood has this thing where they think we don't care about strippers. Mm-hmm. Like they did this in Deadpool. It was one of our complaints with Deadpool, was that she like stopped stripping and stopped like, well, she wasn't stripping, she was a prostitute in that movie, but like she started dressing more respectful. Right. And I think Hollywood has this thing where like we don't care about people who dress that way or like are involved in professions like that. Like, and they go out of their way to like, if we have to feel bad for them or if they're going to die and we have to mourn them, they have to be respectable in some way.
I think it was she was involved with like another one of those just dumb, unnecessary like subplots that Emmerich loves, where like, what's her name? I don't know, Will Smith's wife. Maybe she used the alien technology to become a doctor because everything's advanced. But there's like this scene where this like random Mexican lady is like, oh, is my baby going to be okay?
Yeah,
and she's like, you're gonna be fine. And then we have like 20 more scenes, and then all of a sudden she's like rushing them up to the roof, and they're putting them onto the helicopter, and Will Smith's son is like, guys, we gotta take a shortcut so I can see my mom die. Like, like it was just like, and
that would have been fine if,
and
like,
we're kind of like crossing out, like, all right, well, that subplot's done. Like,
and
like,
that would have been somewhat fine if like her death had like a major impact on him. Like, I'm sure, in the scenes that we don't see, he's bawling his eyes out, but he kind of just cries for a scene, and then he doesn't even mention it for the rest of the movie. And like, that's something that I thought this movie suffered from. In the first movie, they handled death, I thought, decently. Like, they had the weird subplot in the first movie with the drunk alcoholic farmer who ends up flying up like the up yours alien assholes, and they really developed in a decent way his relationship with his kids in that movie. And then when he died, they had the really nice scene with like the one army major or something, and he's like, your father's a brave man, you should be proud of him. And the one kid's like, I am. Like, it's a small scene, but that's a nice way to like put a pin in like a death, and to like show emotion. Like, the kid's obviously emotional, but he's kind of come to acceptance to it. It's like full circle. Whereas this movie, he dies, and we're kind of just left to assume that that's maybe his like fuel for wanting to keep fighting, but he probably would have kept fighting anyway. And he doesn't show any real emotion. There's no scene where he's like, you know what, I was about to give up, but now I'm going to keep fighting because that's what my mom would have wanted me to do. Like, he doesn't even have any real relationship with his mom in this movie. It's just, there's a lot of stuff in this movie that's just kind of left to be assumed.
I think she calls him. She calls him on the phone in one scene. It's just kind of like just making sure, like before he goes to the moon. There's also a scene after where her death sort of serves as this bridge scene for Liam Hemsworth to make amends with him, and says, hey, listen, I know exactly what you're going through. And he says, thanks, man. Because he's just kind of staring into space, into his locker, and he's just kind of like, fuck, now both my parents are dead, because they've written off Will Smith by doing some sort of like test pilot launch that happened years ago.
Crash
and
test stunt.
And he basically was challengered. But it's just, the other thing I wanted to talk about was in the first film, one of my biggest complaints was, I was like, why are the aliens here? I watched it recently, and there's a very small scene where they're like, oh, well, it's they're here for the Earth's resources. And it was like, why don't they just like suck up our oceans or forest and like just put it on their force field, like, instead of like, it seems like a more simple approach than like fucking globe trotting from like capital city to capital city, beaming a laser and blowing shit up. Then in this film, the screenwriters kind of like backpedal, and they're like, they came here for our molten core, and like, I assume
to develop the first, or to defend the first one rather. I don't think they really established that they have the technology to just suck stuff up. They just have lasers essentially in the first one. And they describe them as like locusts that just go from planet to planet, consuming the resources. So I think the idea was supposed to be that they're just trying to annihilate us, and then so they have the time to actually harvest the resources from the planet.
Gotcha.
They never establish which resources it is, and I don't think it's something that they can just suck up in the.
Well, this one, I mean,
now in this one, they kind of ruin that and say, oh, they can just suck up the molten core.
Well, no, because
because in this one
the first scene. Or like the scenes in Africa, they say like, oh, last time when like during the first movie, there was this ship that just mounted here and all it was doing was drilling, kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And like to assume that it was going to...
Right, I'm saying they didn't show that in the first movie. Though.
Screenwriting-wise,
they screwed themselves in this movie by saying, oh, because they actually go against what they say in the first movie, which is that they just go like locusts and consume the resources. Mm-hmm. And whereas this one, they're saying that, oh, they're actually more like hives, and they have like queens that like are there.
Hive mind.
Yeah.
Which was another thing where they came to the theory that they said, oh, well, we'll just have to assume that we blew up the queen last time, and that's why they left.
Yeah.
And like that's what they were doing again, but then that all-knowing sphere
Yeah.
it was like nobody's ever blown up like a queen, and you would think that would have knowledge, and it just kind of was like these contradicting kind of like remarks, and I was like, well, did we blow up the queen last time or what? Like, why did they leave kind of thing?
Yeah. I felt like a lot of like the conclusions that people came to in this movie were kind of just like weird like jumps of logic where you're just kind of like, oh, he's a smart guy, so I guess he would kind of know that.
Right.
Whereas in the first one, it wasn't so much like, it was a lot of them like, well, we can try this because nothing else has worked against the aliens. Like, that's what I liked about the first one, is that it was like David was just this like computer savvy guy that like happened to think of an idea about like, you know, sending a computer virus, which is a completely 90s idea, but I love how like schlock 90s that is.
Like a 1990s computer virus would like blow up a fucking like really advanced spaceship,
right? But for the 90s, that's fucking awesome.
Right, yeah.
Like,
or that
when you watch that in 1996, you're not like, oh, in 10 years we're gonna laugh at that. You're like, oh, like computer viruses are scary. Mm-hmm. This is very topical. This is what would destroy the alien mothership.
There's also like so many, with his character, so many weird subplots in the first one where he's yelling at everybody to recycle the entire time, and I thought that was going to have some sort of payoff. Like, I remember as a little kid, I was like, that's going to come in handy, like, later. Like, he's like, hey, recycle that. And, like, and it never paid off. It was just like a weird
I think it was supposed to be more of a character. It's a weird choice for character growth, but it's supposed to be he's more like, he's very like cut and dry and structured, and we've got to recycle, and everything's got to be organized, and computers and whatnot. And then by the end of the movie, he sort of is like letting go, and like, you know, he's willing to do stuff. To, you know, he's smoking, which is something he never does because it, you know, it's hazardous for your health and whatnot. And he's flying, which he's scared of, and all this stuff. And he's more of the action guy towards the end of the movie. So I think it's supposed to serve more of that. But yeah, it is a weird character arc because it's kind of like, oh, you know, recycling's not that great after all.
Right, yeah. It's just... that was really not...
Joe just wrote on his notepad, fingers, question mark, and held it up.
I was trying to be sneaky. I was trying to be stealthy.
I'm sorry, I had to sell you out on that one.
No, that's fine. It was a really weird... it's like the entire notepad fell over. I had to kind of like straighten it back out for him to see.
I want to just like blast through real quickly a bunch of these last... really, a lot of my notes for this movie are just going character by character and destroying all of them or their purpose for being in this movie.
Right.
So next on the list would be Bill Pullman as former President Whitman.
Right.
And now he's kind of like going crazy from his experiences with the aliens, which I didn't actually so much mind that as a writing point in terms of they were consistent with it. Like Brackish Oaken's character, we'll get into that later, like he went into a coma. Yeah. And then the actually one of my favorite characters, the Dikembe something, the South African or the African warlord.
I did like him. Yeah. Uh-huh.
He's schlocky, he's cheesy, but I think he's new and he's got character, and he was
a good new character.
Yeah, he's not just a recycled thing from the old one. Although I hated his partnering with the weird
kid. Yeah,
not a kid, but the
smart guy.
He's I don't know what you just. He's for some agency. He's trying to get David's character to sign paperwork. He's basically like some bureaucratic agency. Like
I don't remember.
Yeah, he's all about just like trying to get David to sign something, and he's like a paper pushing.
I liked his partnership with the kid that you didn't like before, who's the smart one, and he's like, "You got to give me one of those machetes."
That's not him. They're different people.
Did I fuck that up?
There's the first when they first introduced David's character.
Okay.
There's a guy from I cannot remember what agency he's
from.
Oh
shit! Yeah, now I remember.
It's not like the IRS, but it's some agency, and he's trying to get him to sign paperwork. He like tracked him all the way down to whatever.
Because
the running joke is that he doesn't understand weapons, and he's not like a tough guy, and he's a scaredy cat.
Yes.
And then they pair him with the Dikembe character, and he ends up being sort of like a hero. And at the end, Dikembe is like, "Oh, you have the heart of a warrior."
Right? Yeah. I did. Wow, those characters are super similar.
Yeah, they do look very similar.
They're both like he gets into like the helicopter, like in Africa, or no, the spaceship in Africa.
Yeah, he just hops on.
Yeah,
Like, he's
yeah,
like,
yeah,
"Oh,
yeah.
No.
Which I thought was weird. Like, it was like, you don't have to. I
Well,
don't
he
know,
had
yeah.
no reason to be in the movie. Like,
Yeah, it was.
like again, he served a purpose, but they kind of like wrote a purpose for him in. Like,
right, yeah.
he
I
didn't-
kind of liked his character in a weird way. I don't know.
It seemed like he was
something
trying to be
about
comic
those
relief. I thought a lot
characters-
of the comic relief in this movie fell short.
Oh,
And I think
definitely.
that's when, like, if the movie had been funnier, I
Mm-hmm.
could have been okay with the fact that I didn't really like the action. I didn't really like the drama. I didn't like the acting. If I was just, like, laughing, but I felt like I wasn't entertained in really
Right.
almost any way
Mm-hmm.
in this movie. But anyway, Bill Pullman's character, he had this, because of his experience with the aliens, the first movie, he's kind of gone, like, crazy to the point where, like, his voice is now changed. Like, think of,
Yeah.
like, Bill Pullman's voice from, like, that iconic speech in the 1st movie, like, today, our Independence Day.
And they
like,
play that
booming
in
and
this movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Booming and loud, and, like, he's got little, like, grunge to
It's
it.
hard to remember.
And
It's
now
hard
in
to
this
forget
movie,
that.
he's
right,
got, like,
yeah.
a beard, and he's like, oh, my daughter, and the President of the United States. Like,
And also
like this
his
weird, throaty, like, back-of-the-throat voice.
his
like,
aesthetic too. I think he's playing the crazy person appropriately, but like his aesthetic is weird. Like they kind of dress him up like they want him to look like a crazy person, but instead
Yeah.
they've like gelled his hair to look like some weird like old man GQ model kind of.
yeah.
And like I wish he would have looked like less styled. Like, ooh, I got like the top button and like my like loosened tie and like my gelled hair. Like you're supposed to look more like unkept and like fucking like maybe like a crazy like a wrinkled suit.
And
or
it would have been
something,
one
like,
thing
I
if
don't
he
know.
had like some like groundbreaking theory. So it was like,
right.
oh, he's this crazy person, but we should have listened to him all along. But all he had to say was, "They're coming back, and we won't win this time." Well,
then
you were
he-
wrong.
He gives like an awkward speech in like the docking
Yes. Oh,
bay
God,
for like
right.
all those kids, and they're like, okay, like you know, like it's a speech and nobody important is there, and it's
Yeah.
very strange.
So I had major beef with that because I think the movie is very self-aware
Yeah.
of what the first movie did well, but it's
Definitely.
not aware enough of maybe current movies, or maybe just not aware enough of the first movie of itself. So like the movie recognizes how famous Whitman's speech in that first movie has become for us as the audience, because they play it back for us. They realize that's the movie, the reason why we like the
it's
movie.
like the teaser trailer.
Yeah,
that's
like
like
they
everything.
just they
yeah.
they have that everywhere. But instead of like trying to reinvent that or have like a new like speech, they kind of just like half-ass it, and they have two versions of it. They have his kind of redelivered version of it, like which is half-assed in the doc. It's short. There's like two people like kind of listening as they're like fixing planes.
Right, yeah.
And like that's like the better written speech, but it's poorly delivered because now we're hearing Bill Pullman's weird crazy man voice where he's literally like, "Hey, is our independent?" Like it's just not inspiring at all. And then I don't even remember the character's name. I don't even know if he was in the first movie. They mention him like he was, but the guy who ends up becoming president after the current president is
Right.
killed. He's sworn in as president, and then he gives a speech over the radio, much like he did in the first one. And they're trying to play the music behind that, but he just does not have the delivery. The writing is not there, and he's kind of just rehashing the initial concepts from the first one, like, oh, this is on Independence Day, and all the nations
Right,
have to
yeah.
unite together. And it's just like, if you're not going to try to do it better or try to reinvent it, then don't do it at all. Don't have anyone give a speech, because they're all going to pale in comparison to that first speech, which you've already acknowledged to us, the audience, is an epic, like, world-changing,
It's kind of like Will
defining
Smith's
speech.
son. Like, let's show him fireworks. It's
Yeah.
4th of July. It was kind of like, oh no.
Yeah.
Why don't you just have your own personality? Like,
Yeah.
you know, like you're a very different person.
Yeah, so I was not crazy about what they did with Bill Pullman. Another huge complaint I had is the brackish Oaken character just being in this movie again to begin with. Mm-hmm. Like, I mean, he was a fun character in the first one. He was kind of the comic relief where we were laughing at him because he's crazy, but he turned out to be right about the aliens. But then they even kind of like shut him down at the end of the first movie, where like there's the one line where he's like, you know, talking about all the stuff that's happening. He's like, you know, it's been a really exciting last few days for us. And Bill Pullman's character is like, really exciting? Like, people are dying out there. Like,
Right, yeah.
they kind of like shut him down to the point where I was so surprised that they brought him back in this movie. Much less the fact that they
He's a
have
big
him,
part too.
they
Yeah.
have him in a coma for 20 years. So literally since the last movie came out, he's been in a coma. But then he comes out of the coma and they kind of just put him back in charge even though at that point he's like the least knowledgeable person about what's going on of anyone there. Not to mention the fact that he just came out of a coma, so like his body's probably atrophied and shit. Like,
Right, yeah, no,
he should barely be able to walk around, much less like comprehend like complex logical thought about alien technology that we're like just coming into contact with. And then the fact that they felt the need to write this unnecessary homosexual love storyline with him, with his like caretaker kind of guy. Like I don't know, like it just felt so obviously like forced, like, oh, like let's just throw like a gay character in there, and I'm completely fine with that, but don't make it like the unnecessary character, and don't like half-ass it, because he never even kisses the guy that he's supposed to be in this relationship.
Are they in love, or are they just
They're
I
life
thought they
they're
were
life
friends.
partners. No, and if you look at like interviews with Roland Emmerich, he mentioned the fact that they were dead set on inserting a gay character. They didn't say who it was, but there was going to be a gay character in this movie. Which again, I don't know if that's them making up for what they did in the first movie with the like anti-gay jokes.
Yeah, Brent Spiner also looks like Jeffrey Tambor from Transparent this whole movie.
And he's not as funny as he was in the first one. His character is like more over the top than it was.
Yeah.
And they like try to make him like unnecessarily the comic relief, like when he takes the gun at the one point after his character, his life partner dies, and he's, you know, give me that, rah! And he's like firing the gun, like. But none of it's really funny. And again, I hate when movies are like, oh, we have a gay character,
right?
But they fucking half-ass it, and they just like make him fucking kiss. They did it in Modern Family, and it always really pissed me off,
right? Yeah,
where they were like, they had them kiss like off, like barely off screen, so you could like barely see it. Like, you're not doing anything innovative if you're too afraid to like actually show two men kissing. So if you're not going to do that, just don't have it at all. Like,
right?
Because it didn't add anything to the story. We didn't know who the fuck this guy was to begin with,
right?
And all it really added was like one half-assed punchline of like, oh, my life partner died, give me that gun, I'm a scientist, I'm not a character that typically shoots guns like a madman.
Yeah.
And just his whole character was just ridiculous to begin with. So that was just kind of, that made me very mad. And then another example of the movie being kind of like tone deaf, like they have the best fighter pilot from China, which they call her Rain, I think her character's name is in the movie. And, you know, she's like so famous for being a fighter pilot that like people are asking for her autograph when she like lands on the moon base and stuff. She's like that good. But then they kind of just reduce her to being eye candy for the weird Charlie sidekick character. And like that would have been fine if like that was his introduction to her, was like, oh, she's beautiful, but then have him like realize like her worth is like outside of her beauty. She's actually this amazing fighter pilot. Like maybe have her like save the day at one point, and that's something that like makes him like come around more. But they kind of just go with it, and they never turn that on its head, and they kind of validate his weird, purely physical based feelings for her when she ends up giving him a chance. Like, he says something about like marrying her, kissing her, and she's like, oh, take me to dinner first, and they go on a date. Like,
right.
I don't know if you felt weird about that at all, but that like really pissed me off. Like,
no,
there's a lot about this
really,
movie that just felt like super tone deaf. And like,
I got the impression that he was attracted to her physical appearance and her sort of status of being like this famous.
He literally falls in love with her in like one shot. Like they do like one of those like love at first sight shots. Like, she stands up, he knows nothing about her, and then he immediately goes back and he's like, oh, like I found like the love of my life, like blah blah blah.
Well, I think he knows who she is, like, because doesn't he see her during like a part where she's being, I think he knows who she is.
Maybe, but if
I
he
don't know.
does,
I didn't get that impression.
And he doesn't express any like ideas of like, oh, like she's a great fighter pilot. He literally just says like, oh, she's so beautiful. Like, and it's all this like physical stuff, and like,
right.
I don't know, that appears in action movies all the time. Obviously, eye candy is like a big thing in blockbuster movies. But for me, there was so much stuff in this movie that was like tone deaf and like almost borderline offensive to me. Right. On top of it just not being a funny or very entertaining movie, where I was just like, all right, well, I can really dig into how horrible that is. Like,
right, yeah.
Because it was also just an ill-advised, again, it's just an unnecessarily like plot line. Like his character didn't need to be there to begin with. Right. So why do I care who he sort of half ends up with a date with at the end? Like it showed no real,
I don't know, I
development for him as a character.
He was the funny best friend. I don't think he needed super development. I maybe would have liked to see him. Again, they really harp on how smart he is at the beginning, and it never really pays off. Besides, like, he could have done something better than been Liam Hemsworth, like, bunkmate on the moon. And, like, I wish there was something where he's like, well, if I apply my smarts to, like, get us out of this situation, like, they never really do anything like that. But I don't know.
Yeah, there's not a lot that really pays off in this movie. And it was also just the timing too, because I think that whole scene comes at the end, where the end kind of felt like the end of like a comedy movie or a comedy play, where like, you know, in like comedy movies where like, you know, the unlikely characters will like shack up and like start kissing each other, and it's just like a big lovely ending where everyone has someone that they're happy with.
Right, where like the main characters, again, like
the
goofy
main love
best
interest
friends.
get together, the sidekick gets someone, and then the weird like comic relief character like makes out with a dog or something. Like just something like ridiculous where it's like, oh, those two shacked up, like the weird Russian character and the
Right, well, like the girl who's out of his league, kind of, you know, like,
Well, just in the terms that like the endings of comedies are typically like, oh, here's all the 5 different couples that ended up to get together right at the very end at the climax of this movie. Right. And that's what the end of this movie felt like. Like there was only like 2 or 3, but it was like they were all kind of unnecessary. Like because they just kind of came full circle with the David Levinson getting with Charlotte Gainsbourg, like who, again, we didn't really develop her character. We barely developed his character in this movie any further. And then they're just kind of like, oh, okay, we'll kiss now, I guess. And then obviously Jake's going to be with his fiance, and then he's going to go ask Rain out for a date. I don't know, not crazy about any of it, but yeah, that's pretty much the extent of my notes. If we want to get into our fingers,
some fingers. All right, I don't have a lot to say about this movie. It was really sort of a simple. This is so far. I mean, being the very... also, why the fuck didn't they just release this on Independence Day? Like, didn't they do that with the original movie?
I'm not sure. I think they wanted it to be out and gain steam so that you went to see it on it. I think they're counting on a big boost on Independence Day, but I think negative reviews have done so much damage that they're probably not going to get a big boost on Independence Day.
Yeah, I don't... so...
Independence Day falls on a Monday too, so that's not typically a movie release day.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, even the weekend before, like I don't know, but I think this is the most like blockbuster-ish film that I've seen so far. It was a fun sort of sci-fi in ways. Again, I think it was better than Independence Day, but it was also worse than Independence Day. I really don't have any like final conclusion about this still, because I'm just like, well, it was what it was. I've pretty much covered everything that I wanted to say. I'm sad that there was no like boomer like scene in this movie.
That's the thing. I felt like it wasn't even bad enough for me to like laugh at. Like,
right. Well, there were some scenes that were bad, and there were some scenes that were funny bad. I don't know. I really lost some of my... I would lose track often with that first movie because, again, Emmerich loves, like, globetrotting, kind of. And the same thing happens in this movie where, like, they're flying and dodging things when some sort of famous city is being turned upside down, and Jeff Goldblum's like, oh, they love destroying famous cities or whatever. And I was just kind of like, that was a way
too self-aware line at that point. He says they like destroying the landmarks.
They love going for the landmarks. But yeah, overall, I think it was kind of a disjointed story with 5 different screenwriters. It did feel like 5 different movies cobbled together. I think there was a lot more schlock in this, just because I don't know, it was worse, kind of. Worse equals better for me for some reason. I don't know why. But yeah, I don't know. I don't really like the director. I had a fun time at this movie, but again, it really wasn't enough for me, which is I'm going to stop babbling and trying to justify my score, and I'm just going to say that I'm going to give it 2 fingers. It was just under middle of the road, I think. It was a fun sci-fi movie. I wish more parts were cut out, and I wish there was more of that sort of like elite, like, I wish it was more like kind of like Attack on Titan-y, and then there was like more of the scientist stuff down on Earth, and there was less like trying to pander to the audience of the first movie, where it's like, well, there's also guys on a boat, and like there's also like Jeff Goldblum's dad who's picking up just like a school bus of kids, like, like I wish there was less of that and there was more. I wish it was kind of like a harder sci-fi. But that's where I'm gonna leave you guys on Two Fingers.
All right.
Short description, but
on my side of things, I felt like the entire movie felt unnecessary and unjustified.
Oh, definitely, right. Yeah.
It's one of the few movies that I've like come out of this year and been like, that did not need to be made. No one asked for this. Like,
right, yeah.
20 years is like way too long to wait for this, and then
it was
have
bizarre,
it. The special effects were there, but they weren't necessarily like mind blowing enough to carry the movie when the drama failed, or when the jokes failed, or when the acting failed. And I think that was an opportunity where they could have, it would have been one thing if it was a special effects driven and, successfully special effects driven movie where you're just watching some great stuff. And I don't know if maybe we're just getting numb to special effects at this point, but they were just kind of, okay, like it happened. I thought it had like no respect or understanding of what made the first movie so great.
Right.
In my mind, the first movie is just kind of like an action-packed, inspiring movie about the world overcoming its differences and uniting to defeat an alien invasion. And the first movie had, like appropriate and well-delivered punchlines. There was actual drama. The characters were believable for the most part. And even the story, as schlock as it was, is still believable for the most part if you're going to accept, an alien invasion storyline. But in this movie, I felt like I couldn't believe most things about it, namely why it was made in the first place. And the tagline I want to end on is that we had 20 years to prepare, and you also had 20 years to write a decent script. And you did shit with it.
Yeah, really.
Like, oh god, that's the biggest thing that irks me is they had so long. Like, they passed the point of like when you're supposed to make a sequel, so it's like you shouldn't have made it if you weren't going to make it like good,
right?
Like really, really good.
Uh-huh.
But that's why I'm going to give it a half finger out of 5.
Oh wow.
It's one of the worst movies I've seen in a long time, in my opinion. And I'm someone who really, really liked the first movie.
Right.
So that, if I can do the math real quick.
So did you think like 13 hours was like better than this?
I was more entertained by 13 hours. I don't know if that's, I mean, again, it's a sequel, so part of it has to do with it's got an expectation to begin with.
Okay.
Like, and even if you don't like Independence Day, there's a lot of people that I think have a fond place. That's the reason why this movie was made, is people have a fond place in their heart for Independence Day.
Right.
And it kind of just shit on all the things that were good about Independence Day, tried to morph it in. Like, it's the real like bastardization and like perversion of taking Independence Day, a classic 90s movie in most people's minds, and turning it into this young adult, even worse than young adult. Like, I would rather watch like Hunger Games than a movie like this. Like, there was still some entertainment value in Hunger Games, and like, there's nothing wrong with being like that type of movie, but this isn't even that good of a movie like that. Like the punchlines, like, it's something that we always harp on in this podcast is punchlines.
Right.
But if they're good, that still carries the movie, and that's why a lot of the time we're giving scores that are 2.5 or 3. And not like you're really low down on the scale, because it's still entertaining, even if it's not, exactly what we're looking for out of a movie. But the punchlines in this, they all fell flat. I was never really like laughing like I wanted to in like a popcorn blockbuster movie. The action wasn't even really that cool. Like, we barely saw the actual aliens. Like,
right.
And I don't know, there was just nothing about it that really worked for me. Like, I can't give it a 0. It'll be a while before I ever give a movie a 0, because there is obviously some entertainment value in everything.
Right.
But this is about as bad as I can imagine a movie being.
Okay, yeah.
But I think that's going to come out to 1.25 fingers, which will round down to 1 finger.
1 finger. All right,
which
cool.
I think is appropriate.
Yeah.
I think that's the lowest score I've ever given something. I'd have to go back and look. I don't know if I might have given 13 hours a half finger.
You gave it a 1.5.
1.5.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it still sounds right.
Right.
I don't know if I've given anything a half finger before.
I don't think so. You're a generous fingerer.
I'm generous with those fingers. So yeah, one finger for Independence Day Resurgence. And just to sort of close things out here, just remember what we said about the koozies. Go to howmanyfingerspodcast.com or check all our social media. And if we have everything up by then, Lord willing, it might not actually be up by the time you're listening to this if you listen right on Thursday, because we'll just get the koozies then.
Right, yeah.
But certainly this week or the next week, everything should be set up. So buy one of those koozies, like us on Facebook, tag us in a selfie with a koozie, and you'll be entered to win Deadpool DVD or Spectre posters or 10 Cloverfield Lane posters or a whole bunch of other stuff. So that is that.
That is that.
And tune in next week for our review of Swiss Army Man with Jordan Weinrich.
Oh boy.
Oh boy.
It's going to be a good one.
We're going to go record it right now.
Yeah, we're doing a 4-episode batch, and that's going to be real fun.
It always is.
It always is.
And
okay.
So signing out for How Many Fingers the Podcast, I'm Mike.
And I'm Joe. And you guys have a... Mike gave this the lowest score he's ever given in How Many Fingers